Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If this is your first time stopping by, my name is Mercy, and on this channel we do pattern making, sewing tutorials, and DIYs. If this is something you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, thank you so much. For today's tutorial, we're going to be making this cute and easy romper. And I'm so excited for you guys to see this tutorial because there's so much design elements that you can learn from shirt collars to cuffs to inseams pockets, plackets, and the likes. So let's get into it. I'll be starting off with my basic bodice block, but in this case I'm going to use the straight side seams instead of the shaped side seam. This is mostly because it's a loose fitting romper. Also, the tutorial on how to draft this bodice block will be linked in the description or in the cards above. So the extra measurements needed to draft this will be the length of the romper and also the crotch depth. Now here's an image on how to measure the crotch depth. Now measuring from the neck point, I marked 35 inches as my romper length, and then from that point I'm just going to extend to make sure I have a straight line. And next I'm going to extend the hip line to the bottom on the side seams and then on the CF as well. Measuring from the waistline, I'm going to mark my crotch depth, which was 12.5 inch, which is about 32 centimeters. Next, I'm just going to mark that line towards the center back, the side, and then the CF, and connect like so. So here I'm just going to go ahead and label here the crotch depth. Next, I'm going to mark the crotch extension for the front. Now to get this, I'm going to divide my hip measurement by 16 inches, which was 2.5 inch, the same as 6.5 centimeters. So measuring from the CF, I'm going to measure 2.5, and then also at the bottom, I'll mark 2.5 and then connect like so. To draw out the crotch, I always like to keep my French curve straight from the waistline to the hip line. So the only part that has the curve is between the hip line and the crotch depth. So just draw it out like so. For the crotch extension at the back, I'm going to be adding 2 inch extra to my 2.5 inch measurement I got for the front, which is 4.5 inch and about 11.5 in centimeters. Next, I'm just going to mark it out and extend it like I did to the front as well. Now to draw the back crotch, it's best to draw from the waistline to the end of the crotch. Now from the bottom of the hem on the side front, I'm going to raise the hem with about 1 inch. Now this is just a style preference. If you want, you can leave it straight, and you'll see how this turned out towards the end of the tutorial. Next, I'm just going to draw a curve around that point that I just marked. And for the side back, I'm just going to leave that part straight. On the back shoulder, I'm just going to measure my shoulder length of 5 inch, which is about 12.5 centimeters. Next, I'm going to bring the armhole down with 1 inch, both on the front and on the back. I brought it down this much because we're going to be having a drop shoulder. So dropping it 1 inch will give it a little bit of ease around the armhole. Also, for more ease, I'm going to raise the shoulder point with 1/2 inch. Next, I'm going to mark my new shoulder line from the neck point to the shoulder point like so. Now from the new shoulder point, I'm just going to connect that to the new armhole depth and just connect like so. For the drop shoulder, I'm going to be using 2 inches, which is about 5 centimeters. I'm going to measure that 2 inches from the shoulder point and then connect down to the new armhole depth, like so. So please take note, when you're marking the drop shoulders for both the front and the back, make sure it is about 4 to 5 inches wider than your top arm measurement. The top arm is the same as the biceps, so basically around your biceps. So in cases where you don't have that much ease, you can lengthen the depth of the armhole or raise the shoulder with more. So moving on to the front part, I'm basically going to repeat the same process. So I'll be raising the shoulder with 0.5 inch, and then here I'm just closing up my shoulder dot so I'm able to draw out the new shoulder line. Now before drafting the shirt collar, I always like to drop the base of the neck on the front with about 1 cm or half an inch. Now I do this for extra ease, but it is optional. So here I use half inch. Next I'm just going to connect to the new point, like so. Next I'm going to be transferring my shoulder dot to the underarm. And to do this, I'm going to measure from the original underarm point. I'm going to use 3¼ inch. Now this measurement is usually between 2 to 3¼ inch or 5 to 8 centimeters. Now to mark the part where my dot is going to end, from the tip of the shoulder dot, I'm going to measure 1½ inch. Now usually this measurement is between 1 and 2 inch, which is the same as 3 to about 5 centimeters. Next, I'm just going to note that point. So once I'm done with the markings, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out my pattern through the new outlines like so. Now to fully transfer my shoulder dot, I'm going to go ahead and cut through the underarm dots which I marked. And once I've cut through, I'm going to go ahead and close the shoulder dot. Then I'm just going to tape it in place, and basically that's it. Now please note, my pattern already has a seam allowance of about 1 inch on all sides. But because I want it to fit a little loose, I'm going to go ahead and add an extra ½ inch seam allowance to the sides. So to cut my pattern out, I'll be using 2 yards of this vintage linen fabric. Because this is a one-piece romper, I'm going to go ahead and add extra ease for the crotch. Now to do this, I'm basically going to slash through on my waistline, spread, mark 1 inch in between. Next I'll just pin in place and basically repeat the same to the front. After adding the ease, the next thing I did was add my seam allowance all around my pattern, basically around the neckline, the center front, the bottom, the hem, the neckline, everywhere basically. Next I'm just going to cut through. Now after cutting, I went ahead to notch my important points. I notched the dot, the waistline, the hip line. Also I notched the armhole point as well. Before sewing, I'm going to go ahead and cut my inseam pocket. So to do this, basically I fold my fabric into 4 and place my palm in a slanted form like so, and then basically just draw around my palm, also making sure there's enough room for your hands to sit in comfortably. After marking, I'm going to confirm the pocket opening. Now usually I like it to be around 7 to 8 inches long. So once you've got the desired length, you can just cut, and then if you have to trim, if it's too wide, you could just go ahead and do that. So here I did trim off a little because I felt it was too big. Now if you do have enough fabric, you can also cut your pocket back with the actual fabric you're using. The first thing I'll be sewing on this romper is the button wrap or the placket. Now to measure this, I'm going to take it about 2 inches from the hip line. So from that point is where I want my placket to end at. And I'm going to notch that point. So the length of my placket here, or the button wrap, was about 21 inches. So next I'm going to cut that on another piece of fabric, but in this case I'm going to add about 3 to 4 inch extra. Now I wanted my finished placket width to be about 1 inch. So here I'm going to cut out 3 inches. I'm going to use 1 inch as my fold, and then the other 2 inch unfold will be the width of my placket, which is like 1 inch at the end of it. Again, The width of my placket will be 3 inches and then the length will be 25 inches. Now once I've marked that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. And I'll be cutting 2 pieces for that. To mark out my dots before sewing, I'm just going to take a pin and pin it through both sides of the fabric so that it also reflects on the other side. Mark with a chalk and basically just connect with my ruler those points. So towards the hem of the romper, I ended up removing 1 inch from the length. Now this was because of the ease that I added earlier. So definitely keep that in mind when you're making yours. Because of the curved hem on the bottom of the romper, I'm going to be cutting a facing for this part. Also, I'll cut a facing for the back part as well. I made the width of the facing 2.5 inches wide. Now at this point, I've gone ahead to overlock all the pieces of my fabric. So here I've gone ahead to notch that point where I want my placket to end at. Now this notch was about 1/2 inch in width. So I'm going to be sewing from that notch to about 2 inches before the end of my crotch. So here I'm just going to sew out 1/2 inch as my seam allowance. Now because we didn't cut the center front on fold, I'm going to take out that 1/2 inch that I added so it looks like my fabric is on fold. So you see how I'm folding it here. So basically I'm removing the 1/2 inch. So here's the final look of my placket. So here it's about 1 inch on fold and then the extra folds were 1/2 inch each. To mark out the placket opening on the center front, I'm going to be measuring 1/4 inch further away from the 1/2 inch. So when unfolded, my actual placket opening will be 1/2 inch. Now once I've marked that, towards the end of the placket, I'm just going to mark a little angle out like so. Now once I've marked that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut. So here is it unfolded, measuring 1/2 inch. Now to get the exact 1 inch opening where my placket will sit in, I'm going to trim off about 1/4 inch off the folded part on the button wrap. Now I did this so that the seams could match. Next I'm just going to pin in place both button wraps on the center front, like so. So I've gone ahead to list my placket formula on screen. Please pause to read. Now towards the bottom of the placket, I'll be leaving about 2 to 3 inch excess. So here I'll basically just repeat the same process on the other side of the button wrap. So here I'll just be sewing out the 1/4 inch, which is already folded out. So basically I'll just sew it down all the way to that notch. So towards the end, I extended the notch with about 1/2 inch. So I went down 1/2 inch, like so. And then you're going to make sure you want to sew exactly to that point on both sides. That way your placket doesn't come out slanted. So here I'm just making sure that line, that point where I ended the placket is the same on the other side. So just make sure they're well aligned. So next I'll just be joining the second side of the placket as I did the first. Now towards the end of the placket, you're going to make sure you back stitch properly. so that part doesn't unravel when you're trying to close up the placket. Now once I'm sure they both end on the same line, I'm going to go ahead and make a notch close to the point where each of the placket ends, or the button wrap. Now please make sure you don't notch beyond that line, because if you do, it will be difficult to close up properly. Next, I'm going to roll over the button wrap towards the front like so, and pin in place and basically just stitch down. I'll be ending my seam just to the point where the notch ended. And I'm just going to repeat the same to the other side of the button wrap, or the placket. So here both wraps are already sewn in. Now to finish up the placket, I'm going to place the side which is going to have the buttonholes over on top. That means the side of the buttonholes is going to be on my right hand side. Next, I'm going to pin the left side and the notched part together like so. Now towards the back, you're going to make sure the seams lay out flat like so, and then you can see how the placket is tucked in between those seams. Next, I'm just going to run a stitch over like so, making sure it is exactly at the notched point and back stitched properly. Now once it's stitched in place, I'm going to go ahead and trim off of the seam allowance. Now before I seal it off finally, I'm just going to trim off a little bit of the excess and then pin in place so that it doesn't shift while I'm trying to close up the final edge. Next, I'm going to fold in about 1/4 or 1/2 inch of the bottom part of the placket and continue my seam from the point of the notched area all around the bottom part of the placket. Now once I get to the other side of the notch, I'm just going to pivot my fabric like so and just do a stitch over it. So here's what my finished placket looks like. Next, I'm just going to give that a good press. Next, I'll be sewing out my dots and also facing the bottom of the hem. So for the hem, I'm basically just going to place the facing with right sides facing each and pin in place, and then sew out with 1/2 inch and also do a top stitch. Also do the same for the back. I'll also be joining the center back with 1/2 inch. Now at this point, I've completed all my seams and I've gone ahead to also press them out. Now this is what it looks like. Now moving on to the inseams pocket. Now I've gone ahead to just make a note of the left side of the pocket bags. I'll be placing my pocket bags 1 inch below the actual waistline. So here I'm just going to pin in place and basically repeat the same on all sides. Now one thing I wish I did different was use my actual fabric as my pocket bags, but I wasn't sure that I'll have enough fabric. That was why I ended up using the lining. So definitely use the actual fabric as your pocket bags when making yours. Or add about 1.5 inch towards the opening of the pocket bag if you intend to use a lining. So here I'm just stitching this part down with 1/4 inch. Now after attaching the pocket bags to the side, I went ahead to iron on a seam interfacing around the opening part of the pocket. Next, I'm going to just pin the sides in place like so and make sure the points of my pockets align. Next, I'll be sewing 1/2 inch from the point of my armhole, which is that part I'm marking out, the point of my armhole, and then around the pocket bag. So once I get to the point where the pocket bag starts, I'm going to sew below with 1 inch, and then from that point pivot like so, sew around it, and then also 1 inch towards that point, and then 1/2 inch all the way down. Now to finish the hem, I'm going to flip the back side of the hem over to the front and stitch it down with 1/2 inch like so. And I'm just going to basically repeat the same to the other side. So here's the final look of my inseam pocket. At this point I already pressed it out, so this is what it looks like. Next, I'm going to close the shoulders. Now to do this, I'm just going to flip it to the wrong side, stitch it down with 1/2 inch, repeat the same to the other side of the shoulder, like so. And once it's stitched, I'm just going to go ahead and give that a good press. So here my side seams are all pressed, the hem, also the shoulder. So to close up the bottom, I'm just going to pin one side of the front and one side of the back towards the hem like so, and stitch it down. So here it's already been stitched and pressed out. Next, I am going to close up the bottom, the center of the crotch. So here it's all done. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and finish the hem. So I'll just be running a stitch of about 1.5 inch wide around it. So here's what it looks like all done. Next, I'm just going to press that again and also repeat the same to the other side. So guys, I think there's going to be a part 2 to this tutorial because there's so much more we still have to do. Like we have to draft the drop sleeve, we have to do the cuffs for the sleeves, also the 2-piece shirt collar, the buttons, the button holes, and yeah. So definitely there will be a part 2, but this is what it does look like so far, and I hope you were able to learn a thing or two. So guys, I'll see you in the part 2. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.